Between all the fancy foods and amazing restaurants in Japan, there is one dish that excites me more than all other, and this is ramen. Putting the finger on what a ramen is in detail, I don't know. There is so many things that make a ramen. It's the way they make it, it's the atmosphere of the ramen bar, it's the taste, the flavor, the smells, the aroma. But when I go to eat ramen, at least I know, and for me this means that I'm not eating a Chinese noodle soup, I'm not eating a Korean noodle soup or udon or soba, I'm eating ramen. And for me this is something special. I can understand that for foreigners it might not seem so exciting, because I remember back like 10-15 years ago in Norway, we didn't have ramen restaurants. We had maybe we had Japanese restaurants, but at best we would just find Asian restaurants, and the noodle dishes or the ramen would never be the main dish. It was always like on the last page at the bottom maybe, or even in Europe you couldn't find many. Maybe I found one good one in London. But if I ordered some ramen or udon at a Japanese restaurant 10 years ago in Oslo, I would get something that doesn't even come close to be comparable with the ramen I get today. It was really bad, or it was a very bland noodle soup. It was not much better than just buying a cup ramen and making it yourself at home. So I can understand why people, when they first come to Japan, it's easy to think that why should we buy these noodle soups? We can just buy a cup ramen, or we can just make it ourselves. But then you will be sorely mistaken. You'll be missing out on something that is evolved 100 times over the last 10 years even. And the last 50 years it's evolved so much, it's crazy. People say ramen is like junk, or they look down upon it, but it has a very long history in Japan. I think you can trace it back to like the 1600s, and then it was noodle soups that came from China. Originally it was called Shina soba, and then it became chuka soba, I think around the 1800s or something, and some people still call it chuka soba.
Right.
I don't know, I think the word ramen first appeared in early 1900s. If I remember correctly, the first ramen bar where they called it ramen was in Asakusa, and it was in early 1900s sometime.
Yeah, and also you tried revival ramen?
Yeah, that's true. We went to a ramen museum in Yokohama, and they had one of these ramen bars in the ramen museum. They had reconstructed the first original ramen from Asakusa, so we tried it, and it was it was mama. It was okay, but nothing phenomenal, I think. But it was interesting, especially for ramen fans.
Yeah.
Getting back to the history of ramen, it's interesting that after World War II is when it really started to develop in Japan, and it was kind of caused because there was a rice shortage in Japan. They needed to find another source of carb than rice, so they went for grain or wheat and started to eat a lot more ramen. And then they developed a lot of these we today call classic ramen. They came about after the war, the most usual or classic ramens are usually shio, shoyu, miso, and one more that I forgot.
Tonkotsu?
Tonkotsu, hi.
So how is in Norway? There are some ramen shops.
I feel ramen is starting to get the recognition it deserves abroad also. And in Norway now, it started to pop up ramen bars, at least in Oslo. I think now there's like 5 or 6 of them. None of them have impressed me particularly, but there is one called Koie that I thought was okay, miso ramen. So I'm sitting outside one of the more famous ramen chains in Japan and also outside of Japan, and this is called Ippudo. And Ippudo can be thanked for kind of bringing ramen to a Western audience or raising the attention outside of Japan. They were the chain that first started to branch out seriously outside of Japan. Ever since ramen first came to Japan in the early 1900s, it was kind of always popular. In the 80s, ramen started to kind of, during the bubble I guess, it started to become less popular. So Ippudo decided they would make ramen popular again, and they started to make, they started to popularize ramen in another way than it had ever done before. Their goal was to kind of make ramen popular for all. Before Ippudo, ramen was kind of regarded as a man's dish or a worker's man's dish, and in most ramen bars you would find working men going to have their lunch or their
and
dinner.
also it's open till midnight.
Open till midnight, so the clientele is not the same as today. After Ippudo started to kind of try to change the perspective of ramen, it's become much more popular with all kinds of audiences, and today you will find families going to Ippudo. There is just as many women as men going to Ippudo, or ramen in general. It kind of, and also they brought it overseas, as I said. So, Ippudo, they deserves a lot of credit for the job they've done. I think many people, they don't understand the kind of work that goes into a bowl of ramen, but it's the culture behind it and the history behind it here is kind of amazing, and it's much deeper than many people are aware of, I think. You have these shokunins, these people that spend their life perfecting the dish. It's kind of a Japanese mentality that expands beyond food, but in the context of food, all these restaurants, they have persons that are dedicating their life to making these dishes. They deserve respect, they deserve to be tried. When ramen first became popular, it was kind of based on like one central ingredient, like the soup was based on fish or chicken or maybe pork. But now they are making these crazy concoctions where they're mixing fish and they're boiling pig heads for 3 days or a week, and they're mixing in bird broth as well, and they make all these crazy combinations that just makes these soups so exciting.
So is this a unique phenomenon?
I think it is. I didn't hear about this from any other noodle soup, that they made these crazy rich soups, these super rich flavors. I never had any other noodle soups that experiment so much, that go so far, that go so into making like a perfect balance of flavors. It feels like it's almost a competition about making it rich but still not tasting too fatty, and just getting the balance just right. And I'm sure they have noodle soups from all corners of the world, but this special Japanese ramen soup, it is something that, for me at least, is on a higher level than all other noodle soups. That might just be me, but that's my impression.
So this is why you decided to explore many ramen shops last year?
Yeah, that's kind of why I decided to try all these ramen shops in Tokyo. I started in Tokyo, but I realized now that maybe I should go on a tour in Japan, because they have all kinds of different ramen from all corners of Japan. Actually, we already went to Fukuoka and tried this original Hakata ramen, which was very different from the modern Hakata ramen we have here in Tokyo now, these famous chains like Ippudo or Ichiran.
So you think if you want to eat ramen, you should go to ramen shop, not to go to other restaurant?
Yeah, I think if you want to experience, of course, like I said, there are many noodle soups, but if you want to experience the peak of what a noodle soup can be, then you should go for a Japanese ramen, and you should do it in Japan. I tried it a few times outside of Japan, and I know that they adapt the flavors of ramen. Even Japanese ramen chains will do that. They adapt it to foreign palates. But the ones I tried outside of Japan, they have not been as good as the one I tried inside Japan.